Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. Just weeks removed from the Street Fighter 6 gameplay trailer and a character roster leak that subsequently followed that event, there has been one character who is set to feature in the game being talked about at present more than any other. The combatant I'm referring to is of course Ken, a fan favourite in the series who has been a recurring playable fighter ever since the release of the original game way back in 1987. In his leaked artwork depicting his Street Fighter 6 appearance, it reveals an aged, grizzled, stoic-looking warrior rather than the stylish, easygoing, red gi-wearing athlete that we have all become accustomed to. In fact, further leaks claim that the reasoning behind this more haggard image is that in life Ken has been on a downward spiral and is now living as a bitter has-been who has fallen from grace with even his beloved wife leaving him. So what on earth is going on here, and if this is true, how did this fighter fall so low? Well, personally, based on all of his previous appearances in the Street Fighter series, all the answers to these questions may already be there. So in today's special episode, not only are we going to look at the future of this character, but his entire sprawling video game journey that has now been going on for 35 years and counting. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the rise and fall of Ken Masters. Yeah! The game that was simply titled Street Fighter, released in 1987, was a very different game to all those that would later follow it. With, apart from being rudimentary compared to its successors, would only allow gamers to play as two different fighters. Both of these athletes had identical movesets and were intentionally the same so that they could be assigned to the arcade cabinet's first and second players, with Ryu being assigned to the player 1 button layout and Ken receiving player 2. This pretty much laid the foundations for Ken's existence in the Street Fighter universe. He was literally made to be the franchise's Luigi, with the fighter forever living in his sparring partner's shadow. While at this point there was not much to separate Ryu and Ken aside from their gi and hair colours, it is speculated that the blonde was based on real-life karate world champion Joe Louis. Louis was an American who would train in a traditional style over in Japan, then would return to the US and become a famous champion. Looking at his hairstyle and red apparel on the front of magazines and in promotional shots, it indicates that the connection between the two seems highly likely. The game's original planner, Hiroshi Matsumoto, would give him the name Ken due to the fact that in Japanese the word meant fist, which meant that he would have a name often held by Americans which also sounded cool in Japan simultaneously. Now, depending on whether you were playing as player 1 or player 2, Ken or Ryu would fight their way through the World Warrior tournament in Street Fighter 1, and if a player was skilled enough, they would defeat the master of Muay Thai, Sagat, in the finals. As the franchise got bigger though, and the titles received their own deep lore, the game's canon would explicitly state that it was Ryu who had reached the final and face off against Sagat, with Ken becoming further embedded as just the start of the franchise's supportive sparring partner. Moving 4 years past the original game in the series, we would get the title everyone remembers, Street Fighter 2. This would see the red and white wearing duo return into action amongst a colourful cast of new playable fighters. The revolutionary game featured character design from Akira Yasuda, who would help flesh out the Ken character further. Akira Yasuda, also known by the alias of Akiman, would take additional influence from American kickboxer, martial arts choreographer and actor Benny Aquiles, after he was penciled in the Square Jungle manga. While starting out initially as not that much different from palette swaps to one another, throughout the Street Fighter 2 era, both Ryu and Ken would be given more defining personalities. Ryu was depicted as a stoic, serious athlete, where Ken was a happy-go-lucky one. His win quotes in Street Fighter 2 also revealed that he has a giant ego, with him often reminding opponents about his greatness. As brash and arrogant as he is though, it was clear through this era that his heart was in the right place, with his honour, hard work, endurance and discipline meaning that he would never back down from a fight. In fact, if you play as Ken and defeat M. Bison, it reveals more of his softer side, with him marrying his love interest Eliza. As mentioned, while Ken started as a Ryu clone, in later Street Fighter 2 editions, Ken's character was modified to focus on style and attack speed, along with a notable focus on more brutal judo throws, such as his trademark knee striking grapple. The two fighters' moveset would be further diversified from here as the series progressed. With the Street Fighter franchise being outrageously popular by 1994, we would of course get the infamous live-action movie, which would tell the Street Fighter story radically differently from the games. Ken would be played by Damian Chapa, with him and Ryu trying to make money in the movie by setting up a deal selling toy guns to some terrorists, depicting the pair as virtuous conmen. Sadly in the movie, Ken would not even play second fiddle, as even Ryu was bumped down the card in favour of Guile, as the American Hollywood producers saw an American character who was part of the military as far more marketable apparently than a pair of karate bums. The film would see Ken in a rivalry with the movie's second tier villain, Sagat, and gets involved with the other fighters taking down Shadaloo at the end of the movie. This version of Ken would of course also be the one seen in the Street Fighter the movie games that were based off of this now cult classic favourite. In the Japanese Street Fighter 2 animated movie that was released that same year, Ken would play a much bigger and more prominent role. The non-canon to the game movie is set directly after the events of Street Fighter 2, and sees Ken settled down with Eliza, but still yearns to defeat his friend, rival and sparring partner Ryu. In the movie he fights T-Hawk, which M. Bison witnesses through footage he has acquired. The cunning M. Bison realises that Ken and Ryu's rivalry can be exploited, so hunts down Ken and uses his desire to beat Ryu as a weakness to hypnotise him. Later in the movie, Bison sets the hypnotised Ken on Ryu, who initially refuses to fight back, but is soon given no choice. Fortunately, as the white gi wearing fighter prepares to retaliate against Ken, memories of their past wreak havoc on Ken's mind, and he manages to break free of Bison's mind control, leading to the two friends teaming up, pummeling the dictator into submission. Ken would obviously also be a part of the American cartoon based on the live action movie, whereby he would re-emerge as a con man. In this one, Ken is shown to be greedy and adventurous, looking for all kinds of treasure within this G.I. Joe-like kids show. What may surprise you, as insignificant as this show may seem today, merchandise that was linked to it would actually end up feeding into the main Street Fighter canon, that is still significant to this day, with events transpiring that would lead to Ken gaining his last name, Masters. The reason for Ken becoming Ken Masters was due to the fact that the Street Fighter action figures were produced by Hasbro, the same Hasbro who were producing both Barbie and Ken dolls. Just in case parents were stupid enough to purchase their child the wrong Ken, Ken would gain a surname to ensure that this unlikely event would never become a reality. As for all the media that followed the success of Street Fighter 2 video games, television in Japan would receive Street Fighter 2 V, an animated show that acts as a prequel to the video game. In this one, Ken is a wealthy 17-year-old from a very rich family. Living in San Francisco in a large mansion, he still spends time training with Ryu, and the pair end up going on a training journey together after they have their arse handed to them by Guile. Shenanigans unfold in this episodic series, with Ken even becoming smitten with Chun-Li to the point where he takes her on shopping sprees to buy her things. Moving into 1995, we would finally get a new video game, and the birth of the Street Fighter Alpha series. Mid-quels that story-wise occur in between the events of the 1987 game and Street Fighter 2. Alpha reveals that after Ryu's showdown with Sagat, Ken would go on to fight in and win a US martial arts tournament, which is where he would first meet his lover, who he married at the end of Street Fighter 2 Eliza. Now he has one thing on his mind, finally beating his sparring partner Ryu in combat. Ken would make the effort to fly back to Japan so that he could fight his friend. In Alpha 2, Ken finds himself victorious, but realises the victory is fairly hollow, as Ryu is not his usual strong self. It seems Ryu is pondering what makes a true fighter. The fist he used to beat Sagat, or the one Akumi uses to murder people. Ken realises Ryu has been deeply troubled since his last victory over Sagat. He reminds him to keep fighting in order to find the answer, and gives him his red headband, and that whenever he feels lost, he should use it as a reminder of their fight, and to keep fighting to find the answer. Ryu happily takes the headband, and they both go their separate ways. By Street Fighter Alpha 3, Ken begins to wonder about his own life. Ryu seemed to be on the right track again, but what for him? In this installment he encounters Karin, who tells him she has followed his career and is trying to best her rival Sakura to prove she is superior. basically with the rivalry between Karin and Sakura depicting what if Ken and Ryu were girls. Ken advises her it's good to have a rival, not for supremacy, but to keep on training harder and focusing. Also in Alpha 3, Ken faces off against M. Bison, with Bison easily defeating him. In this state of weakness, just like in the Street Fighter 2 animation, the dictator hypnotizes him and puts him under mind control. In this brainwashed state, Ken fights Ryu on M. Bison's behalf, but Ryu manages to win, snapping Ken from control. After M. Bison is defeated in the game, Ken is happy to see his old friend once more, with a promise of a new duel the two part their ways. Canonically, this obviously leads on to the events of the second World Warrior tournament in Street Fighter 2. But if the Alpha games revealed to us anything, it would be how keen Ken is to prove he has surpassed Ryu, and secondly that M. Bison managed to use this weakness to take control of him. There would also be Street Fighter Alpha the animation and Street Fighter Alpha Generations, but both of these animated pieces would build strongly on Ryu's story rather than Ken's, which is not surprising considering he has always been the second fiddle man. Ken would also appear in the Street Fighter EX series of games, Pocket Fighter, the Marvel vs Capcom crossover games, and the crossovers with SNK. But Ken's next canon appearance after the Alpha series of games started with his appearance in Street Fighter 3 New Generation, released in 1997. Until the announcement of Street Fighter 6, the Street Fighter 3 games marked the latest point in the Street Fighter timeline. The games see Ken moving into more of a mentor role, with him training a Brazilian teenage martial artist named Sean, who begged to become his student. By this point in his life, Ken also juggled this with maintaining a home and raising a child, with these circumstantial changes straining his relationship with Ryu. Still with a lot on his plate, Ken enters into the third World Warrior tournament, with his in-game ending revealing that he has begun to train his son Mel in martial arts, and also sending Sean to go find Ryu and challenge him like he did years before. Ken also learns more about the mysterious secret society and wants to gain even more info on them, which sees him face off against Urien. He also learned that Ryu had sought after him and travelled far for their long-awaited rematch. Tossing some friendly jabs at each other, the two fight, but with ultimately Ryu picking up the victory against his longtime friend. It would be a while after the Street Fighter 3 games that we would get more canon Street Fighter material, which would arrive with Street Fighter 4 games in 2008. Set between the events of Street Fighter 2 and 3, in Street Fighter 4, new villain Seth sets up the Sin tournament. With regards to this tournament, Ken is not sure whether or not he wants to compete, as Eliza is currently pregnant with their future child Mel. Sensing his inner conflict, Eliza assures him that she'll be fine and that the baby isn't due for a while yet, so he should go meet up with Ryu and enter the tournament. Over the course of the tournament, he encounters his self-appointed rival, Rufus. But the biggest plot reveal of all for Ken is discovering that his old master Go-Ken was still alive and he had survived his bout of Akuma all those years ago. Ken is upset that his master did not say anything to him, but Go-Ken simply counters that they no longer needed a master. Eventually Ken makes it back home to Eliza, but notes that he and Ryu's fight was meaningless, as neither man could give their all, as they were both so distracted with all of the other strange events unfolding. Ken in Street Fighter 4's story concludes with the birth of his son Mel, who, as we mentioned, begins his training during Street Fighter 3. Next up we of course have Street Fighter 5, with Ken being announced for the game on July the 9th, 2015. This game would change Ken's look more than ever before, giving him both a new outfit and hairstyle, as well as altering many of his moves. This distanced him more from Ryu than ever as well. Occurring between the events of Street Fighter 4 and 3, Ken is still reflecting on his previous bouts with Ryu. And in the events of the game, the two spar, but the fight is interrupted, leading to later parts in the title with the pair joining up with each other and other fighters to take out M. Bison's Shadaloo for good. M. Bison is eventually defeated at the hands of Ryu, but after the villains have been vanquished, the training partners and rivals face off one more time. Ryu manages to defeat Ken, but drops his red headband, with Ken handing it back to him, figuring he might still need it. The two are later seen sharing a friendly fist bump, bringing all of their canonical appearances to a close. So, Ken's last moments in both Street Fighter V and later down the timeline in Street Fighter 3, both end the same, with the fighter losing to Ryu. But as previously illustrated in the Alpha games and supplementary material, such as the Street Fighter 2 movie, Ken is not as secure about being second place to Ryu as his confident exterior often exudes, which is what I theorise leads to his downfall by Street Fighter 6, with his obsession causing Eliza to eventually leave him. While this was his canon story, throughout video game history, Ken has also had an alternative form that is bred from his jealousy of Ryu, that he has transformed into multiple times away from the main Street Fighter story. This form, known as Violent Ken, was conceived off of the back of Ken being brainwashed by M. Bison back in the Street Fighter 2 animated movie. In this state, he has no empathy for others and cares about no one, craving nothing but more power and violence. Speaking of this narrative, you could argue that the existence of this version of Ken goes even further back than the animated movie too, with the concept's roots being planted in the Street Fighter 2 two-part manga. In this illustrated piece, Ken goes missing after he and his friend Ryu confront Bison at their own master's dojo. Ken reappears further in the story, having been brainwashed by Bison's drug doll, resulting in him getting into a violent conflict with Ryu. Emotionally conflicted throughout the bout, Ken manages to snap out of it, but it gave readers a taste of some of what was to come with the character's alternative future. This concept that appeared in movies and manga for many years was never actually included in any of the Street Fighter video games. However, when this story would be first drawn upon in video game form, it would not be Capcom who would pull the trigger, but instead SNK in their SVC Chaos title that saw release in 2003. In this video game, Ken has once again been brainwashed, being completely controlled by Shadaloo through the use of Psycho Power, the same energy that flows through M. Bison that he utilises in combat. While obvious similarities can be drawn between evil Ryu and Violent Ken, their alternative powers are from very different sources. Violent Ken utilises Psycho Power, and evil Ryu uses the Satsui no Hado, the same surge of murderous intent that is wielded by Akuma. As for the reasoning in SVC Chaos as to why Ken can be manipulated and controlled in such a way, it all falls down to a weakness within the fighter's personality and ego. Basically, Ken often feels pangs of jealousy due to being outclassed and surpassed by his friend and rival Ryu, creating an opening for the brainwashing to take place. Once full of hatred and jealousy, this Psycho Power enhanced version of Ken becomes determined to prove he is stronger than Ryu once and for all, even resulting in being able to throw purple Hadoukens in this state. In this game's isolated plot, seeing the red headband he gave Ryu helps him snap out of the brainwashing, helping him to return to his normal self. If in the title a match is set between regular Ken and Violent Ken, Ken in his regular form wonders if deep down he desires to become his darker form. Completing the game as either version of Ken results in similar endings after defeating the game's final opponent. The only difference being that if playing as Violent Ken, it shows that the evil power consuming him lost its hold. Then both endings depict him returning home with his love Eliza. After the release of SVC Chaos, a series of manga would be published in 8 volumes celebrating the game. In this adaptation, Violent Ken emerges differently, instead being convinced by Red Amara, who is originally from the Ghost and Goblin series, that he needs to join him. Afterwards, he is forced to undergo an operation on his brain, turning him into his violent form. Like in many other stories though, it is Ryu that helps him return to the light. He would show up again in Street Fighter 2 Turbo Udon's comic series, once again being brainwashed by Shadaloo's group. But in the world of video games, his next appearance would not be until 2015. But in this instance, it was not a fighting game appearance at all. The game I am referring to is Project X Zone 2, a crossover tactical role-playing game for the Nintendo 3DS that was developed by Monolith Soft. This title crosses over characters from a cornucopia of universes, including Bandai, Namco, Capcom, Sega, and even Nintendo. In this game, he is depicted with purple flames and glowing red eyes, where he serves as an opponent. Once again, as usual, it is Ryu who brings Ken to his senses. The following year would see the character used within Udon's comics once more, this time within Street Fighter vs Darkstalkers. In this instance, Ken's feeble and easy to manipulate mind is taken advantage of by Lord Raptor, who manages to transform him into his violent form. In this story though, at least the plot is mixed up somewhat, as neither Dan, Sakura or even Ryu are able to help change Ken back to normal, and later he gets into a fight with Rufus and nearly kills the man. In this comic book, it is Ken's loving wife Eliza who helps restore him to his senses. Still, after years and years, first being created as a concept in the early 90s, Violent Ken had still never actually ever been in a Street Fighter game, which is crazy to think really, considering how long he had been floating about across so many different media sources. As stated at the beginning of this content, this would finally change with the release of Ultra Street Fighter 2, The Final Challengers, a game that up until this day is the newest iteration of the classic game. His existence in the game's story is very similar to most other sources, with M. Bison taking control of the man using Psycho Power. Violent Ken is more aggressive, fearless and cutthroat than he is in his regular form. He can move around a playfield at a quicker pace, as well as glide towards the ground after jumping in almost slow motion. In addition to Ken's regular moves, he now has new maneuvers at his disposal, such as a special dash-like teleporting technique that allows him to make a mockery of opponents. He does have some new weaknesses though, for example that when fighting in this more violent and erratic form, he uses up energy more quickly, and his lack of coherence puts him in further danger of burning out during fierce combat. In Ultra Street Fighter 2, if playing as the character, once he has destroyed all of his opponents, obviously a final encounter with M. Bison himself lays in wait. Once Ken easily disposes of the despotic dictator, in the game's ending Ken regains control of his senses and leaves on a boat. On board he admits to himself that he will never go the same path as Ryu, but hopes to see him at the end of it, bringing Violent Ken's Capcom appearances to an end for now. In 2018, Ken would join the Super Smash Bros. Roster when the title Super Smash Bros. Ultimate saw release. As for Violent Ken, Ken does have an alternate costume that looks much like his appearance back in SVC Chaos. Speaking of this costume, it is used in both the Mewtwo and Dark Samus Classic Mode routes, where corrupted or brainwashed forms of various characters from the game must be fought. Ken, in his SVC attire, obviously is used in these instances. So where does this all leave us today with what we know about the upcoming Street Fighter 6? Well, we know that Ken is obsessed with defeating Ryu, and he is also capable of a transformation that makes him uncontrollably violent. Personally, if I was a married woman like Eliza, who has a husband who becomes overwhelmed with jealousy and blind violence, then I would not want to be married to that man either. Thus meaning that I would not be surprised one bit if Ken is washed up by Street Fighter 6 due to these dark, violent tendencies ruining his relationship. At this point, only time will be able to tell us if domestic Violent Ken is going to become a thing. But personally, with everything we know about the character, I think this scenario seems pretty likely. So who else is looking forward to playing as domestic Violent Ken in Street Fighter 6? Let me know in the comment section down below. So ladies and gentlemen, that was the history of yet another highly important figure from the Street Fighter universe. If you enjoyed this one, I make dozens of videos like this covering Street Fighter's colourful roster of heroes and villains. So if you are new here, make sure you hit that subscriber button and begin binging said videos right now. Videos like this are in part made possible due to the wonderful people who have gone that one step further, choosing to support what I do on Patreon. Speaking of those in a class of their own, humble thank yous go out to A Murder of Crows, Carl Johnson, Sebastian Velez, Heo Paula Lopez, Nostalgia Collector, Ben Harradine, Corey I. Sr., Ryan Ditched, Evan Balder, Philip Manth, Azra Arkai, Jotkin Varela, Michael Calix, Ego, Jordan Durant, Ian Boyle, Nick Daniels, Princess Zana, Daniel Daly, Computer Man, House of a Ted, Gary Pinkett, ECU Professor, Johnny Holly, August Piazza, Justin Wang, Capcom vs SNK, Hermes Gonzalez, Man Shovel, Michael Hall, Sang He, Norma Stitz, Langston Miller, Noob, Sarah Powell, Vlaming Renee, Marvin Liga, TOG Driver, Luis Viant, John Bates, David Bale, Chris Fisk, Rick67, Antonio Rodriguez, Craig Jenkins, Since Spaces, Punk Toast, and everybody else who backs what I do on Patreon. Thank you so much. Yeah. Cheerio.